Like this Zeret applicator, for example, which has claimed to cure arthritis with Z-rays. There are no Z-rays.
Adam, you will be king someday. What do you think?
Many Bothans died to bring you this information. This is the Morning Stream.
All right, we're back, everybody. We're back. That reminded me of this show I'm watching, or this cartoon I'm watching on Adult Swim on HBO Max that I missed during its heyday, I guess. But have you heard of Metalocalypse or Metalocalypse?
The name's familiar.
It was totally new to me. I don't know how I missed it because I watched a lot of Adult Swim there for a while. Yeah. And it's just like this stoner dream heavy metal band story thing. It's weird. It's so weird, and I love it, but it's weird. And it reminded me of that song. That song's got a lot of that. Except the guy's a little more a little more Cookie Monster. But it's all pretty ridiculous. It was, I guess, the Home Movies guy made it. And,
okay, yeah. All right.
It seems interesting. So HBO Max, everybody, get your Adult Swim on.
Nice.
Wendy time. That's what we call this on Thursdays, where she joins us and we talk about important issues of the day. We also have a little fun. It's not all serious. It's not all doom and gloom.
No, we try to lighten things up, lighten difficult topics up, like dating profiles with cats and 80-pound iguanas.
Exactly.
What about a dating profile with an 80-pound iguana?
Oh, my Lord. Brian, you're singing my tune. So this should happen shortly, assuming she's online. So hopefully she picks up the phone. Sometimes she's quicker than this. Oh, there it is. Hi, Wendy.
Hello.
Hello. Let me play this.
Something wrong, Batman? Has anybody seen Wendy?
Sensorially. Well, that's totally weird.
Hey, it's my sister Wendy. She's a therapist. Hey. She does stuff for people all the time because she's a therapist. She does that all the time. And she comes on Thursdays and she helps us with little problems we have here and there. Sometimes they're topics, sometimes they're questions. You never know. But
not our problems, though. She doesn't help us with our problems, Scott.
Well,
we don't have them. And,
secretly, these are all about me anyway, so it's all just to help me.
Oh, never mind.
Wendy, how are you? How was your... Well, I guess we didn't see you last week because I had to leave early, but how's the last 2 weeks been for you and the Dunford clan?
We're doing good.
Yeah.
We are doing good. I don't know how to answer that question ever.
I know, right? It doesn't. It's like you say you're doing good, but then there's all these caveats. Like
it's like the same.
Mm-hmm.
We do the same thing every day. Everyone's healthy. We're bored and busy all at once, and so I don't know.
Yeah.
Guess that's good.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm starting to see the toll on Peter with not being around other kids. He's getting weirder by the minute.
Oh no. He's going to invent something cool, though. He does. That's the kind of kid he is. You leave him alone.
Oh, is that what
long.
he does? He's like an inventor?
He's just a smart little weirdo.
And like, I don't know, the things that come out of his mouth.
Yeah. He'll either be
oh, great. Why do I have my weirdest child last? Because I'm going to be tired and I can't help him. Whatever. No, he'll be fine. It's just, he needs some other 8-year-olds is what he needs in his life.
Yeah, I think all 8-year-olds should, like that's the worst part about this or I think it potentially could be, and who knows we probably have to wait 10 years to find out if there's any real impact, but there's a lot of kids who just aren't getting the social stuff that they would normally be getting right now. And that's important stuff, turns out. So they're all going to be like what people stereotype as homeschoolers. I know not everyone's like that, but you know what I mean? Like not all homeschoolers. But
and let's just be clear. Homeschooling has gotten a lot better since you and I knew homeschoolers when we were younger. There was nothing but weird going on.
Yeah, that's true. It's gotten way, way better. But part of that was at least
socializing.
They didn't.
Now they go in groups and they do all sorts of. They're really connected with each other, and so the weird anti-socializing thing is remedied a little bit. So.
Well, one would hope. All right, hey, we're going to talk today a little bit about a thing that's happening in our sphere. That is to say, Brian and I's and sort of our little nerd sphere that we exist in. So, in the last week and a half or so, a whole bunch of brand new accusations of some pretty gnarly conduct started flowing out of lots of corners. There's stuff happening, as it always is in Hollywood. There's things happening in political circles and that sort of thing. But where it's really hitting us where we live is it's happening in the gaming business, the gaming industry in general. And it's not just, hey, this guy at certain company is abusing his power and influence, although there are plenty of those examples. But it's also bleeding into, hey, that, Twitch streamer with 50,000, live followers every time he does anything on stream. Turns out he's got this happening, and he's doing it with fans, or he's messing around with girls at conventions, or he's, it runs the gamut currently.
Somebody being a butt.
Someone being a butt. There's a bunch of butts right now. Lots of butts, people being butts. And it stings a lot because having gone through my own sort of version of this, not me being the butt, but having somebody I worked with turn out to be a butt about a year ago, doing some really gnarly stuff, it hit you like a truck. You're like, whoa, what? Wait, what? Hello? When did this? Who's did? What? Why? Like that sort of thing. And so now I'm really like hyper vigilant and paranoid about it.
Yeah.
I just can't fathom. I just don't want anyone to get hurt, So anyway, part of me's like, oh, this is the worst. Can humanity get any worse? And then the other part of me says, no, this is good. It's sunlight. It's what you want on this stuff. In the past, it's always been here, but now we can expose it, and it can be pushed, it can be improved upon. The change can happen. Whereas before it was always locked down, always locked in, and people would go their whole lives without saying anything about it. So I realize that those two things can sort of be true at once, right? Like on the one hand, it seems awful. On the other hand, it's like, well, wait, maybe it's good that we're hearing all of this. I'm curious what you would say in terms of those points, but also as a extended community of mostly, good-hearted folk who are just playing video games and having fun and looking at new announcements and talking on podcasts and just trying to, enjoy our not only our hobby, but in some people, in a lot of cases, our way of life, our living, that sort of thing. What do we tell them about this? Like this moment that we're having. And in the middle, by the way, of all these other moments, it's like a freaking Twinkie with 8 kinds of filling in it. We thought we had all the filling, but turns out there's another layer in here of
okay, well, that's actually, could you answer a question for me before I share my thoughts? So Gamergate was what, 2014?
13, 14, yeah.
So what is different about that and now as far as people's response and those kinds of things, right?
I mean,
isn't this similar?
It's similar in terms of controversy, but the Gamergate stuff was... This is different because the Gamergate stuff is a big, complicated beehive that I don't know if I want to poke necessarily, but because there's going to be a whole lot of different takes on it. But basically the whole thing then was you had a group of people who were claiming there wasn't any kind of they wanted what was the word, something in journalism, they basically were saying that reviewers and game writers and that sort of stuff were not being good journalists. We're not following ethics in journalism. That's the word I was looking for.
Okay.
And so people would review games and were paid off to say it was good, or these were the accusations. But also a ton of that, and I have no doubt that there were at least a couple of people who really, that was the main gist of it for them. That it was just purely, we need to hold games journalism to a higher standard, and they need to be better at their jobs. And I'm sure those people existed. But most of what came out of that was a lot of really hateful stuff toward, in particular, female writers, contributors, reviewers, that sort of thing. And it was pretty bad in that direction. And that's why most people, myself included, think Gamergate was a completely misguided nightmare of a mess of a movement, if you want to even call it that. It was very misogynistic, and I'm sure I'm going to get emails about this, and that's fine. Bring it on. Leave your return email address so we can actually talk, though. That'd be great. But anyway, so that's kind of that. But then this thing here is, these are people who've had, these are women that are having men in power and influence of various types around the industry who have abused that power and influence.
Real quick, I know that. I know what this is compared to that. What I wanted to clarify with the Gamergate thing is that what emerged is that there is a large undercurrent, or at least an obvious one. Like it's like it surfaced in a way that maybe hadn't been seen before. At least the general public was not aware of, right? Like I consider myself part of the general public that is not in the nuances of any of this. And then I hear about this and hear about all the misogyny and hear about how these women are treated. And I'm like, what the, ew, that's awful. And then it's out of everyone's consciousness in the general public, right?
Yeah.
Maybe you guys have a little bit of it lingering, but what I want to know is, what was anything said, done, or figured out, or did incidences of this bad behavior change,
just slowly start disappearing over time, or was there like a moment where like something was done to prevent it?
Did anyone lose their job? Did anyone gain some new perspective and right? Like, and that's what I'm trying to get at, is right now versus then. I feel like we have a completely different world.
Yeah.
And change is possible in a way that systematically was just not then. And I have a couple theories on why that is, but I just wondered, I don't know the answer to that about Gamergate. Was anything different after?
Okay,
or did everyone just go back to their caves and
I get your point.
However they want.
Now I understand your point, and I think it's a good one. Okay, so this is what I think happened. Think of like the Ferguson riots, and result of that didn't really permeate the rest of the country very much. It did some, but not like the way that George Floyd's death did. It feels a little like that. Like that stuff that was happening then was a big deal, especially for certain individuals. But in a lot of ways, everyone just sort of stopped talking about it and moved on with their lives. This time feels different. This feels like I don't want to co-opt the George Floyd situation into this, because it's not even near the same thing. It's its own importance, but it's separate. So I'm hesitant to appropriate it, but it feels like a similar thing. Whereas the George Floyd's death sparked a level of protest that's far beyond anything we've seen since the Civil Rights Movement. And in the same way, these allegations that have come out in the last week and a half in just the little gaming space where it's happened has felt in a similar way more of a catalyst moment, more of a zeitgeist moment, more of a tipping point. I guess I'm describing tipping points is what I'm doing.
Yeah.
Because people are like, all right, again, we're doing this again. Okay, how about we never do this again? So there's a lot of sort of, no more, we're done. We don't want to do this. We don't want another wave of hearing about this later. We all may have thought after 2014, yeah, it got better. Well, actually, it turns out it didn't. Maybe it got even a little worse. And already you're seeing most of the people that have been accused in the last week and a half have either done big, giant public apologies or have resigned or stepped down or been fired. They're big, high-level writers in video games that are wrapped up in this. They've all been fired from any projects they were working on, and those companies come out with statements saying, we knew about none of this. We known, blah, blah, blah. And you can get into the weeds on who knew what and when they knew it and all that if you want to. And what enabling...
And also motives to do this, and
right.
All that.
So there's a lot of that going on right now. So what's different? You know what's different about this time than before? This time, people are copping to it more, weirdly. Like there are more people saying, I know, I got to take care of my issues. I'm quitting today. This has been a problem for years. I know this doesn't help the victims. I can't say sorry enough. You won't see me on social media for a while. I mean, basically they're doing what happened last year.
What they need to be doing. Yeah, what they should be doing.
Well, they're doing what Terpster did last year. And in some ways that's good, a good sign of accountability happening, right? It doesn't change the damage, doesn't help the victims. It doesn't necessarily, I mean, I don't want to speak for them. Maybe it does help them, but it does seem like more people are copping to it and less denial, less digging in. That could be purely my own impression, though, because I've just seen a lot of resignations, firings, and apology videos / blog posts in the last week. And that surprised me. I thought there'd be more lock it down. I mean, part of it, too, is there's a lot of evidence. People have screen capped these conversations they had in private messages. They've screen capped some lewd thing some dude sent them in Snapchat or Facebook private messenger or whatever. Like they're actually keeping this stuff, the women, the victims, and so on. They're saying, you know what? This may come up later. I'm going to screen cap this. And some of these people have screen cap stuff for 10 years and are just now feeling empowered enough to come out and say something. And I always look at these things and go, if you're going to come out and accuse somebody, some higher up somewhere, like yesterday, the lead on the Assassin's Creed games, and arguably the creative mind that made the last 3 such a huge hit, or the last 2 and the third one on its way here this year. He's a big deal over there, and he resigned and did a big apology thing and walked out of there. And it feels like a few years ago that may not have happened. I don't know. I don't know if there would have been people would have helped cover for him, meaning the company or whatever. But it feels like the companies have kind of had it too, like at a very top level, unless they're the problem, and maybe they are systematically. But at the top level, it feels like they're being more, they're saying, all right, that's it, no more, zero tolerance. What are we doing? Like, we're changing this, and here's the other stuff we're going to do. And you kind of see that across a lot of things. You see it across racial justice, and you see it across women's rights and other things as well happening in the larger society. But in the gaming space in particular, that's why this feels different now. It feels tipping pointy, and it feels like people have had it, and the women feel more empowered to say something. And I always ask, to what end, right? Like, if a woman's going to come forward and say, 10 years ago this guy did this thing, it's easy for some to go, why wait so long? How come you didn't do it right away? All those things that people say. And my answer is, because it's freaking hard, and their career was at risk. Their lives were at risk potentially in some cases. Their what's the word I'm looking for? You're asking for ridicule, and you're asking for heat from bad actors on Twitter and other, social media networks when you come forward with something like this. So they're exposing themselves in a really real and serious way. These women are.
To be victimized again.
Again. And not only that, but dogpiled on by that victimization. They'll also get a lot of support. And maybe right now the big swing is the support is way up. Way up. And I don't just mean the culture at large for people that are doing wrong. I mean, like, in gaming, people are more proactive about saying, I cannot believe this happened to you. I couldn't be more sorry that it did, and that I support you. I believe you, and all of this. They're not.
Well, don't you think some of that's related to there are more gamers than just white dudes in their basements? Look at me doing a stereotype. But you know what I mean?
Look at you. Yeah, no, it's definitely, we're maturing as an industry, right? Like we're like anything. There's growth and there's scaling, and there's problems with that scaling. When you start to scale, you start to have issues. Some are systematic, some are one-offs. Like, you just have problems, and this feels like a maturation point for sure. Of an industry that now isn't just catered to 12-year-old boys like it used to be. It's an industry catered to everybody, and there are more women gamers overall by percentage than men.
And let me take just one very specific example of the art work, right? The artistry that is part of this. Because you have various facets of building a game, right? And there's different groups and different subspecies of humans who do certain kinds of work, right? But take the artwork, and I know of one of the people who has apologized is kind of more in the art realm of things, and the cost, though, and I think this is something for people when your system you've gotten used to, and you just don't want anything to touch it. You don't want to see the underbelly. You don't. Like, none of that is appealing, or you weren't looking for it, and now it's suddenly all upended, can be really freaky. And you in the past, and this is my theory about the Gamergate, is that was the first exposure of the underbelly in a way that was very big and public, at least for, the rest of the planet was going, wait, what? You guys are also horrible over there? Okay.
Yeah. It wasn't just forums and little places.
No, it was different. And yet, let's go back. Let's flip the beast back over. I don't want to really look at its belly. And this is I read Jessica Ritchie's. She's the one that put it all together on Medium, right? I read what she wrote and was trying to read through some of the things. And it's like it speaks for itself. She doesn't have to do anything.
No,
there isn't here's the expose. It's just like, here's the words and the evidence, and there's so many. Anyway, but going back to the art situation, is that you have this kind of behavior that has been pervasive, allowed, and we could talk about the individual psychology of one of these folks, and that's fun. But there's also like, you go to a conference and you're handsy and you're annoying and you're constantly soliciting. But no one does anything because you have the power to get away with that. They can all secretly think you're disgusting, but you're still the ticket to this or that, and you just hold too much power. But the real price, so the price is the victimization, right? The price is people don't feel safe. And the real price is the talent that will never come to light because you're a dirtbag, right? Like, so notice most of these are men, right? And they're in positions of power. They're vocal. Typically, they run this or that. That power and being sleazy at the same time has a long heralded history in American life.
Yeah. And
you're safe because it's the network that keeps you safe. The other men who either protect you or don't say anything. You have the women who have lost, either are going to lose because of it, and or they're quiet so they don't lose, but the power differential is always there. Anyway, but what you end up doing is it's not a safe place for a new emerging artist to show up, right?
Yeah.
And then if she gets sexually harassed or is solicited and she says no and she pisses this person off, her career is now, I mean, that's the hashtag Me Too, is how many actresses never had careers because that gross, disgusting of a person, dude, like, got rid of their career options for them. So that loss of even more diversity and more expansion and more talent and the gifts people have to offer. I mean, to me, that's the saddest part about this. And I do wonder if that's part of this, is that there is a recognition of the lack of, I don't know, good that we have because we have the lack of people.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Things have been narrowed down to, and that's the systematic racism thing, right? You don't have people with diverse opinions or life experiences or just different, anything on a board. You're going to make decisions based on your life experiences. You're going to think other people think like you. That's human. But without those diversity of, artists it just makes things better, right?
Right. No, I agree. Also, so there's one in particular that really struck me. Because it also hits pretty close to home. But there was a concept artist who worked at Blizzard, and she is amazing. Like, her work is incredible. It speaks for itself. It's just self-evident how talented she is. It's embarrassingly good, so good. And anyway, she detailed a bunch of stuff that happened. And part of the thing that kept jumping out at me is this industry in particular, and this is maybe true of a lot of businesses or a lot of industries that have a lot of conventions and sort of, outlets to sort of have, thousands of people congregate and come see the thing you're working on. It is very, very alcohol fueled party culture. So if you have a con,
frat house kind of.
Yeah. And if you have a convention, and not that people can't drink responsibly at conventions, I'm not saying that. Sure. But
I do.
Yeah, Brian does. He does.
Good job, Brian.
I look like the weirdo with the Coke in the corner, but it's fine. I don't care. But I go to these. I've been to some of these parties. The ones at BlizzCon are bangers, man. Like, they're big and loud, and everyone gets really drunk, and it's just a very high octane. Everyone's really excited to be around it, but they're drinking and drinking and drinking, and it's that every one of the stories that I've read in the last week and a half had something to do with alcohol. They all did. And I'm not saying alcohol is the problem. I don't want anyone to hear me wrong here. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that if the culture is, hey, we do cool stuff and make enough money so that we can afford these big lavish parties where we can all just get blasted with each other, and then we are not behaving in our best interest because we are impaired while we're doing this, a lot of this stuff, this is where it goes south. And it's where your primal bullcrap comes out.
Exactly, right. You have to have that within you. The alcohol just basically lowers those filters that usually have up that prevent people from seeing that you're kind of a jerk deep down inside.
Right. So if you've got a tendency to, I don't know what it is, like, And I've seen some of this happen. Like I was at a BlizzCon once where no names, but I watched some people that were very, very drunk, just gropey on the girls that they were trying to meet.
Okay. Well, you can use my name, Scott. It's totally fine.
I was gonna say Tom Merritt just to throw some interference, but you guys are like me.
That's why I was groping. Let's go ahead and put it all out there.
I'm kind of
you were groping Tom.
I'm kind of it's 10 o'clock. I'll see you guys in the morning kind of guy. But anyway, I saw some of that stuff firsthand, and now part of me goes. So let me ask you this. This is where it gets tricky. Because part of me goes, oh, yeah, I witnessed some of that and thought, that's douchey. I guess they're all drunk. Whatever. Let's move on. Let's go to the other place and see what's going on. But now I feel like, should I have said something? Should I have is part of the enabling culture that we're just going, well, they're dudes and they're drunks. It's, and that girl's laughing. But sometimes she's laughing because that's her best defense in the scenario she's in. You know what I mean? So.
Well, yeah, boys will be boys. You just said all the cliches that exist and how we keep people victimized. Yeah.
Right.
Boys will be boys. And also she's laughing, so she's fine. Oh, and she's wearing a short skirt. So I guess that's that. And all of those tropes and all of that history of sort of maintaining the status quo of power. Let's be clear about where it comes down to, because if you ask any victim of sexual abuse, assault, there's the list is long on that thing. It's not all in person, right? Probably more so than maybe another group of people. Maybe like the Bankers Association has the same problem, but they're not online all day, sending texts to each other. So maybe we don't have as much data.
Yeah. Good job with that mortgage loan, bro.
Right. You guys have documented your evidence a lot better, right? But,
yeah.
but that very core thing is that it's a power differential, right? So why aren't we hearing about women doing that? If it's about power, right? Because there are women in power in different places, but why aren't they harassing? And not to say it doesn't exist. I'm sure it does, but systematically, does it exist? I don't think so. Mm-hmm. And part of that is women are not predominantly in power in most industries. But also there's a long history of blaming the victim for the things that have happened to them, right? That's part of keeping it all going. And so you can say, well, you drank, so there you are, or you wore that outfit, or you could have said no. And that's the thing. If you are a white dude listening to this, and I'm always going to call people white from now on, that's my new thing, is to, whenever I talk about anyone, I say that they're white.
Yeah.
If you're a white dude listening and you're like, well, and listen, I understand that impulse. I understand it. It makes sense to go, well, I need to understand why this would happen. He's normally a really nice guy. Well, she must have done something. And what you don't maybe realize is, like when Scott, you were saying about her laughing. So let's talk about that just for a minute.
Sure.
What is actually happening to someone in those circumstances? They are seeing an opportunity. They are being told, oh, you're really good. Yeah, let me help. I mean, it is a setup for this dynamic to exist. Now, a good person is not going to do anything with that. They're going to say, oh, your art's good, or your development style is amazing. We really want you on our team, period. But when you have other intentions, or your boundaries are pretty wacky, or you have a power problem, you are going to then use that to then persuade other things to, you're going in another direction. But that person is now, that woman in particular, is now in a bind. Yeah. So I have to do this. This is how this works. And for many years in many industries, that's exactly what women have even told each other. Oh, that's just that's how they act. Well, you just got, because that's survival, right?
Yeah.
So survival, take that as sort of the core thing here of being safe and being valued for who you are, not for your gender, not for how you look, et cetera, right? But for who you are. So that's very vulnerable to have our real selves sort of being judged, but that's not what's happening. And so then what do you do when you feel threatened or scared? Or usually these are very psychologically subtle. It's not like someone jumps out of and screams boo. It's usually slow. And we have a lot of evidence of that throughout, if you research this, right? But this idea of giggling, right? So you have a response to the stress of threat. right? So you can have a fight, flight, or freeze response. And there is a fourth one, and we've talked about it on the show before, but the fawn response, which includes giggling, which includes telling the person they're amazing, or like praising the other person. Right. Now, how confusing is that if you're a dude who's a douchebag and you are maltreating someone and they're responding by giggling at your jokes? I get it. I get why you're like, what? That doesn't make sense. Well, it does if you take 5 seconds to learn about what power and control looks like, what when an ego is running the show, when, and then you add alcohol, and then we get sort of the reality maybe comes out for certain people. But when people have a lot of power and have continued to go up in power, this becomes a lot more insidious and dangerous. And you could study Harvey Weinstein's whatever, his life and how he handled everything. And he's a classic example of this. And we all go, ew, gross, he's disgusting. And not everyone's going to be at that level, but there are versions of this at lower levels, which leads to my question. Yeah. How this is different from the time before, and going back to sort of racial justice issues. There are more white people involved in racial justice now than ever. And civil rights only existed because enough Black people were convinced it was worth the risk. Those were the victims you eventually get in mass, right? And I think that's happening here, is that there's enough voices. That's why you never hear about an accusation when there's like maybe 1 or 2 people. You hear it after there's 26. You hear it after there's 10. You hear it, there's 6 people willing to go to court. There's probably 10 who are not willing to go to court. With Cosby is an example of that, right? So there's almost a critical mass of support that has to, for these people to put their lives through hell after it's already been through hell. Mm-hmm. So, I wonder with this, what makes this different this time is potentially there was a pandemic still. I don't know if everyone knows it's still going. Yeah. But there's a pandemic, which means people have had a little more time and they're not gathering at cons left and right. They're not doing the behaviors that perpetuated and being as busy maybe or whatever. That's my current theory, is that people have just had some space from some of their outlets. And so they're going to fill the streets and they're going to demand this thing because they have the energy, the time, and they're seeing the injustice. And I just wonder if it's not something similar with this, that here is this moment that works so well because everyone has to slow down. I'm not jumping on a plane.
I think some of that's true. I think the slowdown is definitely a part of it. It definitely plays a part in it. But I also just think and maybe this also plays into what I'm about to say, which is there's just a fatigue for it. Like, we're just like, really? We're still doing this? Like, this still is happening? We all kind of wanted it to, in our various positions of not having to deal with it directly, we all kind of want it just to go away or to take care of itself, or we assume, the industry will do it. Riot had problems? Don't worry. Riot will do a top-down thing. They've already said they will. We're good. The business is improving. Everyone's doing it. And then when you find out it's not, I think we're just all, oh my gosh, I don't want to talk about this again in 5 years. I don't want to. I don't want to have this massive thing happen again. Also, I have a daughter who's about to graduate soon into the world of video game development. That is her degree. She's getting a degree in games development at the University of Utah, and she is about this close to graduating. She's waiting to find out if she has to do all her electives because there's no college right now, and again, pandemic. But we're about to send her into that world. Not only that, we were going to send her as an internship up to Montreal to possibly work for somebody like Ubisoft, and it's Ubisoft that had to fire the dude at the top of the Assassin's Creed game because he's been dorking around for 10 years in ways that are really, really disturbing. Like, I'm having feelings of my own about just, oh my gosh. I know she's 23. She's old enough to make her own decisions, and she's a tough chick and she'll kick people's butts. But it's still scary for me to say, hey, this world I love, these games, all this stuff, it's helped provide me a career. It's an amazing place to be. Go out there, Carter, and knock them dead. And then at the same time, I'm like,
ticket right to the Lions Den, enjoy.
And we're not even touching on the other issues that are in the industry right now, like ridiculous overtime, way underpaid people. A project gets finished and the whole team gets laid off, even if it's a success. Like, there's a lot of other underlying sort of need for something, whether it's full blown what do they call it when you all get
Overhaul?
unionization? That's the word. Whether they need workers unions or whatever it is to try to solve some of this stuff. You hear a lot, especially even in the news, you hear a lot of stuff about not cram. What do they call it? My brain today. The word.
STEM?
What do you call it? What'd you call it?
Are you talking about STEM?
No, where everybody's working too late and like cramming for a test almost, but it's a work related thing. And I can't think of the name.
Right.
Crunch. Gosh dang
Crunch.
it, Crunch. Captain Crunch. Anyway, the industry is all controversial now too because crunch is a seriously bad thing. Like it's really bad, and it takes priority over people's health, over their family lives, over their mental health, that sort of thing. And that's all a whole separate thing. So this is like on top of that. And it's just, it's depressing. So I'm like, hey, Carter, good luck. It's going to be awesome. She's ready for a creative career of the lifetime. And at the same time, I'm like, oh man, do I really want her to have to deal with this? Anyway, that's a side note and totally selfish.
You don't want her to deal with this. You want it to be better. And here's a thought, and you guys can help me because it's just popping in my head. But just this idea of sort of exhaustion with the underbelly of all the things, right? Like who is left? Who is left for us? Okay, so let me explain what we've been doing this summer. So I don't know where I got this idea, but it has worked magnificently. So someone feel free to copy me and do this and then tell me how it's going. But we pick a theme for the week. And then every night at dinner, we are talking about what we've learned about something related to that theme. We watch movies based on that theme. We eat food around that. It's just stupid, but it gives us something to do. Okay. So the first week, I was like, I hadn't thought of anything and I just knew it was going to be hot the next day. So I'm like, okay, it's the hot week. So we had hot dogs and we ate hot tamales and did a hot sauce tasting contest. And every
yoga.
Night, hot yoga. We talked about like how Kelvin works versus Celsius and Fahrenheit. It was nerds research. It was really fun. And the kids flipping loved it. It was amazing. And then we ran out of ideas by the end of the week. And Abe talked about the Miami heat. And then I talked about when a dog is in estrus in heat. It got desperate and funny.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it was really funny. And then we watched movies on lava and volcanoes and other things, right? Okay, So that was week 1. And then I had all the kids give me ideas. So we built out the summer. We each have a week. So the next week was racism, which was fantastic. And we watched, so the CNN did a town hall with Sesame Street characters for kids on racism. And it was so well done. If you have little kids and you're like, how do I help them understand this? It's fantastic. These kids asked hard questions. Big Bird did a great job. It was amazing. Anyway, and then we've read books and listened to podcasts. And every night we talk about something about historic racism and or current systemic racism. My kids know about redlining and tokenism. It's shocking what they knew before we started. It was fantastic. So, but also hard. It was a hard week, right? And there's a lot of Netflix shows you can watch to educate yourself too. So fascinating, interesting. All right. And I was like, okay, guys, this week is Mr. Rogers.
Nice.
Because we needed to feel a little joy, a little hope, a little whatever. And so it's been interesting. We've been watching episodes. We've been talking about his life. And his story is interesting in that he grew up really wealthy. Yeah. In fact, he was like driven to school in a limo or something. And he was fat and nerdy and he got made fun of a lot and didn't have a lot of friends. And Abe said something interesting. He goes, oh, it's like the perfect breeding ground for a serial killer. Or, the Unabomber or something like this setup to be a bad person. Yeah. Right. And we talked about the influence of his parents. They were incredibly generous and constantly serving. And he spent a lot of time helping them as they served others in the community. And so he went on to be a Presbyterian minister and then got his degree and then did these children's programs. And so what's fascinating is we watched a couple of the episodes and to see the emotional intelligence that he was teaching children and modeling and the slowness of it and the psychologically sound technical work he did. I couldn't appreciate when I was a kid, but I can now. And it is like a lost art form. And my kids asked this question. They said, will there ever be another Mr. Rogers? And I said, I don't think so. I hope so. But the idea being, like, there obviously are very good people. But what's tricky is that was the world where most of us grew up in, right? Which is there's good and bad. Somebody's all good, somebody's all bad. It's a little bit developmentally like we were all kind of black and white thinkers. And now we're adults, right? And we're looking at the world, and as every underbelly shows itself in these different places, how poorly people are treated, minority populations, women, children, whatever. We're looking at what we thought was stable and safe and we could rely on. And now we know that that's maybe not true. What do we do with that? So going back to Mr. Rogers has been really interesting because I can feel that solidness when I think about him and we talk about him, and I can see my kids, even though it's boring because it's slow and their brains are now trained to watch things at a refresh speed of 0.5 second, that they are feeling, it's just fascinating to watch. But it's kind of, we were trying to balance those two. I think it's because it's related to how do we ground ourselves? I mean, the pandemic was so unnerving. It continues to be unnerving. The divisions, the family challenges, whatever, like, is there anything that feels safe anymore? Is where we might find ourselves. So we have to be careful rather than wanting it to go back to when it felt safe, but everything was under the cover of darkness. Or do we use this as the time where we do actually make changes, where we can create a society, or at least our local communities to be places that are better, like legitimately safe for everyone, not just safe for, those who have the power in our majority.
Yeah, I hope that it's a meaningful change in this particular corner that we're talking about, as I do everywhere, obviously, but I don't know. It's just a bummer. It's a bummer. It's been one of the worst weeks and a half, and in some ways I still just feel really naive to it, and that bugs me a little bit that I'm just so like, really? That happens? This happens? Like, it's one thing to find out that, like once in a while you hear something weird like, oh, did you know in this one country they killed their chickens by biting their necks off, and you're like, whoa, really? People bite the necks off of chickens? Wow, never heard that before. That's one thing. But when you say, did you know that there's all this assault and rape and attempted rape and stuff that's happening like within the games business and from people you like and admire who make really cool experiences you like and are some of the most creative people working in the business? And I'm doing it again. I'm just like, really? What? That guy? Like, and that's just naive, and I'm just tired of that feeling. I'm tired of that feeling that this is, and it's funny. The pandemic is almost like this weird glue on all of it. So whether it's an actor I liked or a producer, a director, or whatever it is, whatever thing's getting tarnished because they're just garbage behavior, running through it all is like, and there's a pandemic.
Right, as if we didn't have enough going on.
Do you think it's actually the opposite? I feel like it's maybe without the pandemic, none of this exists.
Maybe
like this.
That's what I mean. There's the through line is so double edged, right? Like in some ways it causes the fatigue, the irritation, the frustration, the whatever.
But it gives us the slowdown, which gives these moments time to.
In front of our computers, in front of social media, a lot more than if we were out and about and doing a regular.
When the world of business, as FedEx would call it, is slowed down to the point of some people straight up don't have jobs anymore, others are working in different ways, other people are furloughed, whatever it is. Now you are forced to slow down and reckon with what's happening instead of, well, I'm just too busy for this. I have to keep going. I have to keep going, which is kind of what you've been saying.
Yeah.
And I think that's I think that's it. I think that's the big
Well,
problem.
I think we've had a tipping point in apologies. I think that is something that is interesting because the system would protect you from needing to apologize typically. Like there was, the leader of our country will not apologize ever, right? Like he has a form of that, but there is this version of like, we demand it. You have to acknowledge this. And I think that's a newer requirement that the internet has given us, because you can do it in a half second on your phone. There is no, you got to have a press conference and stand up there with your wife smiling that she'll forgive you or whatever. Like Those days are gone. This is we want everybody to, right? But that then teeters on is it legit? Like, are you really, did you get a template that tells you what to say? Or is this real? I would point everyone to Mark Harmon's podcast about his long apology, the work he had to do as he was sexually harassing one of the writers. I think it was on Community at the time. He sexually harassed her for years, and he says this apology to her in Twitter, and then she basically is just like, really? Is this that's it? It's not one sentence. It's real. And he goes through and talks about what he had to do to really, really change and to feel it, and that it's way bigger than you write something and disappear for a half minute. I mean, that's the reality of
Dan Harmon, by the way.
Dan Harmon. What did I say?
You said Mark Harmon.
Oh my gosh, Mark Harmon.
We don't want to besmirch the fine actor star of Jag.
I am so sorry.
Jag and NCIS. Continue on.
Anyway, okay. My bad. Anyway, but that's an interesting listen to sort of look at the real work, which, like, I would sort of sum up all of this is sometimes I'm working with someone for a year to help them move past a particular thing, or to change some behavior, or to, figure a few things out in their lives. And it's so much work. And we're talking, if you have a lifetime habit of seeing women in particular ways, treating them in particular, you need your brain altered, and it's going to take some time. So to say, I'm sorry, disappear, go off with your millions somewhere, like, that's not happening. Like, legitimate change, and this is what's the reality of all of these underbellies that keep showing up, is that it's work, it is hard, it requires collective action, it requires vigilance, all of those things, and that's something we've sort of struggled with as a society to maintain long enough to help systems change, right? So there's that. Can I throw out one last thing? Sorry, yes. I have too many thoughts on this.
That's all right.
I read this recently, and it's a really great analogy for lots of things, or a way to think about it. When people are saying, I know a cop and he's a good person, and so he's, not all cops are bad. And the person said, you don't equate someone who you think is good with how they do their job.
Right.
So you don't say, oh, Scott, you're a good person and you're an artist, so you therefore are a good artist. Or whatever, right?
Yeah.
Or you can say, Wendy, you seem like a good person. You must be a good therapist. It has nothing to do with how I do my job.
Right.
And thinking about that in terms of, you have these creative, amazing minds that can produce this content that you love and is so creative. So they're good at their job, but does that make them a good person? Or does the good person make someone, you're a good person, so you're a good cop, right? And so there's this interesting split of those things that I think we do this pile on very naturally of, like, good, so therefore you're good.
Yeah.
Bill Cosby's funny, therefore he's America's dad.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Well, good at his job. Was he good at,
just
being
his
good?
job.
Yeah.
Just his job. So I think it's hard for us to do some of this psychological work of not shortcuts. We do shortcuts very, very well as a human. That's what we do. We shortcut so we can move on and do other things. And so, to be careful of our biases and to recognize sort of, I don't know where we're at, is hard. It's hard work.
Yeah.
So everyone,
it is.
Take a nap.
It is. Take a nap. And again, I firmly believe that the sunshine helps. Exposing stuff helps. And I don't know what else I can say on that issue.
Aren't you glad your daughter's going into an industry after this?
Yeah.
Yes. Is it supposed to be before this?
And a lot of people.
It is kind of like the McDonald's that just got busted for health violations. It's probably one of the cleanest times to be at a McDonald's.
Yeah. And you just, the hope is that McDonald's will now, maintain better standards so that you don't, we're not trying to besmirch McDonald's. You guys are fine. But, it's a good example. Yeah. It's a good example. But yes.
I don't think we ever had to worry about them being a sponsor, by the way.
Yeah. No. But part of me is a little excited about the idea that it will be her and her generation of graduates who will see the big change. They'll benefit from the systemic changes that are already being implemented by what's happened here is the companies can no longer just hide behind the fact that that we're the company and we make the thing you want, and whatever happens inside our doors isn't really going to affect you. That's not true anymore. Like, gamers will shop with their wallet. And if you are the kind of organization that cannot take care of your systemic problems, they will not support you. Like and that's why they're being more vocal and they're being more transparent and saying, all right, here's what we're doing. And we've hired these people and these people, and we're going to do this and this and this. And they give you their plan. It's because now their bottom line is at risk. So I'm not trying to give too much credit to companies, because really what drives them is the money, and it always will. But right now it's driving in a better direction. So her and her ilk are probably going to get in there, and they'll be the beneficiary of those changes and also the change itself. And that's great. But it's still, you just get these feelings of like, gosh, dang it, you guys. Could we just have less pervs? Could you just stop walking around with your wieners out and knock it off? Like, just knock it off. Just because you're popular and cool doesn't mean that girl down the bar wants anything to do with you and your wiener. That's all I'm saying.
Like, is there a way we could shift sort of the education of our youth to, I mean, think about, most kids will leave high school without any basic money management skills.
Yeah, that's true.
Like the thing they're going to have to do forever, and we don't address it.
It's weird.
It's crazy. And you think about human relations and mating rituals and consent and just like some of that stuff. And I get it. We're supposed to learn that in our homes, but what's going on, everybody?
Yeah.
Right? If that's not happening at home, there really needs to be an option somewhere where there is some education on how things work and what's okay and what's not okay. And I get that's controversial in and of itself. I understand what I'm saying, but wow, if we wonder why everyone has so much debt and can't function, there's lots of things we could do, but we don't. And that's hard. But I think and this is why it's always like the next generation is like, there's hope, right? Because of the way their world isn't the same. I heard this great thing somebody was saying about voting, and I think it was Michelle Obama that answered and just said, she's like, why should I vote? I'm 18 or I'm turning 18. Tell me why I should vote. I can't make any difference. And she goes, what if your grandma got to decide what posters you put on your wall?
Yeah.
If your grandma got to decide what you wore, and they were like, oh yeah, okay, I'm going to vote. Right? But I think that's what you're seeing too, is you're seeing voting in a way, obviously our systems are not built to handle actual voting in the United States, because for so long, maybe 20% of people voted, 30 at max, right?
Yeah.
And suddenly everyone cares and wants to vote, and we don't know how to handle that.
Yeah, a lot of the complaints
about embarrassing in a democracy.
Yeah, some of the complaints about the primary locations not having enough stations or those stations being overwhelmed is that it's capacity. Well, it's like hospital capacity when there's a ton of COVID-19 patients. It's like the same thing. You can. It's like that question. I love this question when someone says, "How is it possible McDonald's sells 1 billion burgers a year, but when I order that many in the drive-up, they can't do it?" It's like, well, yeah, because you're doing it all at once, right? You can't. It's not spread out. And so if your voting system is not used to that level of turnout, we're gonna. I mean, you think it's weird now? Wait until November. It's gonna be. It's gonna get
2020
real weird.
Is gonna be for the books,
Yeah, historic
in every
year.
way.
Yeah, we all thought it was the future, like, hey, flying cars, and I don't know, our computers will clean our house for us while we're gone. And some of those things are true. We've gotten some really cool things technologically.
But let's think about this for a second. If so, I can have a credit card and own property in my name, and you're all like, yeah, of course. Guess what? 70 something? I couldn't. So who was there? Who was there at that moment? How did people think? What was the dynamic? What was happening? And now I benefit from that 50 years later, and I don't even think about it. So Carter is one of those examples of, she's entering the industry in the middle of its ERA or civil rights moment, right? Like she's entering the fray while it's changing, and changing from it is always painful. It's always difficult, because guess what? Homeostasis is nature's way. Oh, let's go to the place where I'm the safest and the most comfortable.
Yeah.
And so it's all of us having to fight to sort of progress, rather than lament that it's not how it used to be back when I didn't have a clue and it was safe. That's what we all want. We all want it to be like when we were kids. Notice how everyone loves to talk about whatever decade they grew up in is the best decade ever. And it's because we were 7 and we didn't know anything.
We didn't have any obligations. We didn't have any worries.
Yeah.
Right.
7 to 10, man. That was
Ideal.
those so good. What a time.
Yeah. Now my 7 to 10-year-old can't see other people, so this is going great.
Yeah, exactly. He can't go out and blow up anthills with his friends. He has to do that at home. All right. Well, I think we've covered this topic pretty well.
Sorry.
Blow up anthills over Zoom like I do.
Yeah, why not? Zoom your anthill blowing up. Sure.
Yeah.
Right.
Don't tell Carter I've ever done that. She'll kill me. Anyway. So did I tell you the other day I watched her scoop a bunch of ants out of the van's little backyard pool thing we have for them. There was tons of ants in there, and she spent like a half an hour trying to save all the live ones and send them on their way. She's so funny. Anyway, I don't know what if karma's real. She's got some good stuff coming her way, I hope.
No kidding.
At least from the ant people. All right. Wendy will get a lot of feedback this week, I'm sure. Some of that we may share next week. We'll see. But always a pleasure having you on. Check out realsteps.org, everybody, if you want to find out what that program is, how you might be involved in it. And one of my favorite parts about it is I get an email once in a while with like helpful stuff. So watch for that and do that. Anything else you want to mention?
No, do that and be nice to each other. Everyone go.
Go be nice. We'll see you soon. Bye. All right. Brian.
Okay.
That was her. Now it's us. Quick email from Jeff. This is our buddy Jeff Sire in Ontario, Canada. Grafton is the town he's in. I will fully dox him eventually.
Grafton.
He says this. Hey, Scott and Brian, wanted to add to Brian's suggestion for Katie when road tripping through Colorado, or Kate, I guess not Katie. Pierre and I rode that route a couple of times when riding out to Nerdtacular. If you continue east of Denver on 70, you can take a short stop for a walk on the Loveland Pass. It is spectacular. Everything, or especially if you're like us and don't live anywhere near mountains. We were only there for maybe half an hour, but it's still a vivid memory in Jeff Sire.
Yeah.
So there you go.
The only part of that's not a vivid memory is the fact that it's west of Denver as opposed to east of Denver.
Oh, oops. I'm glad you corrected it. I'm glad you did, because they would have gotten lost maybe. No, that's good to know. No, but Brian and I, we both live in a place where we totally take these mountains for granted. Like,
yeah,
it is unbelievably beautiful where we live.
I don't when I'm riding on them.
Yeah,
but when I'm riding my bike on them, I totally know those.
You're fully aware of their incline.
Yeah, fully aware.
But when you come out here and you've lived in, I don't know, Nebraska or something, or somewhere with a lot of flat land, but nothing wrong with that. But like Kim in Mississippi is a lot of flat stuff. Mm-hmm. You come up here and you're like, oh my gosh, you live in a bowl of mountainous glory.
Yeah, it is great. And boy, when you go out to the mountains and enjoy the vistas and the nature and just kind of getting away from all that stuff, it really makes you appreciate having a Starbucks in every corner.
For sure.
Just kidding. By the way, that actually is a really good, so going out to Loveland Pass, a really good thing when you're heading out, when Kate heads out to Georgetown to do the train, it's not too much further to go to continue on your way over to Loveland Pass.
Nice. It's
beautiful stuff out there. And I think it's before the Eisenhower Tunnel, or right around the Eisenhower Tunnel, and Silverthorne is right there, and it's maybe about half an hour, 45 minutes east of
Silverthorne. That's a cool name, Silverthorne. I like
Silverthorne.
I like that.
And
a
Lake
lot.
Dillon. It's all cool.
Lake,
all good stuff.
Lake Dillon. All right.
Lake Dillon.
All right. Well, good news, everybody. That's the show. We're done. Patreon.com/TMS is how you support our show. If you want to be a part of our play date tomorrow, it's at 1 p.m. to 3 p.m. right here at frogpants.tv. Brian and I will be playing Jackbox games, and we're playing ones we've never played with you, the audience. So be there if you want to play or watch or participate in any way. That's 1 p.m. tomorrow right here on the Twitch channel. For everything else, frogpants.com/TMS. Love your emails. Keep those coming. I'd love to read those on the show. As you saw, we did a bunch today. We'll be doing more of those as you guys keep those flowing in. All right, let's get out of here with a closing song.
Sure. Dan wrote in, said, hello, TMS friends. I can see from your website